Welcome to episode 62 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast Minute and Players. This week it was surprisingly a lot of 50-50 games, a couple that we were not expecting, a couple that ended up being a win that no one really expected to get except for one faithful Port Adelaide supporter. And then, yeah, the rest were just extremely 50-50, which on paper you could kind of see, but like on the field, it didn't really feel like it was going to be a massive blowout either way, which is really weird. So let's jump over into it. But first of all, how are you doing, Mr. Sarek?
Oh, man, I could be better.
Hmm.
I've unfortunately had to take a bit of a, I guess, nap between the Collingwood game and us recording. Um, in a bit of pain. I've got something weird going on with my abdomen. I went to the gym this morning and it's all been downhill from there. So if I do grimace a bit in this episode, do forgive me, but it's because I'm in pain.
That's understandable.
But apart from that, I've been okay. Not a very busy weekend. Again, I was feeling a bit under the weather then. Hopefully, whatever this is, it will pass out. But yeah, it was a very mixed bag of football. Some contests more interesting than we thought. Some contests that seemed interesting, but when you look really closely, it was a bit of a crapshoot. And then just others that weren't that exciting at all. So a bit to dissect, and glad to be doing it again with you, Blazy.
Oh, you're too kind. Yeah, no, you're right. It was a really, really weird round. Like in our first game, kind of sets that tone. So we may as well jump straight into it with the Bulldogs and Hawthorn.
Yeah, and honestly, with how much the Hawks midfield was struggling, this is one on paper that we thought that they might even compound the issue further going against the Dogs midfield unit, which has been pretty solid all year.
Mm.
And, we thought even if the Hawks did manage to make a contest, which I thought this would be a bit 50-50, it might be from a bit of outside movement, maybe from back half domination.
Mm-hmm.
But no, the Hawks midfield group surprisingly responded really well. They set up some of the better conventional attacks than what we've, especially compared to the last few weeks. And yeah, it was the Bulldogs that really were the one that were forced going very, very long, to very little effect. Particularly due to some very vanilla ball movement from the back half themselves and inability to get all players involved. Again, as we say with the Bulldogs, they've gone better at it this year compared to last year, but they still have a very big drop off between their best maybe 18 players
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of them. And yeah, as I said, the pressure as well from Hawthorn. That was something that was actually a lot better than the last few weeks, actually out tackling the Bulldogs. But it did make the game a bit scrappy at times. It definitely wasn't a clean contest. But overall, in an overall sense, the Hawks had a fair bit more tempo control all night. Even though the game really only blew out late in the contest.
Yeah, it was really much a 50-50 game, bringing it all the way up until about fourth quarter. Like, and even when I was just like casually watching the game, you could see that there were moments between both teams where you thought that they would have an instance where they would just burst the game wide open and create such a
Mm.
massive divide in score, but it just never happened up until that fourth.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in terms of, and I'm going to bring in this with context of I'm not saying about any of these two people's game because I think they were both very good for the night, probably amongst the best players. But it did sort of show the difference between halfbacks and a bit more of the movement and why Hawthorn could get the game going.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was how dangerous that Josh Weddle was with his 20 possessions off halfback, the ability to come up forward and influence the game, compared to Bailey Dale, who got 30 possessions. But unfortunately, and these both were pretty good possessions. Like normally this might be where I say, oh, like someone turned the ball over, but both players, well, I think Bailey Dale was one turnover and two clangers for the game,
Mm-hmm.
and Josh Weddle was the opposite, two clangers, one turnover. But unfortunately for the Bulldogs, as good as Dale was, he just couldn't find enough people to kick the ball to continue the chains. Where, as I said, where Weddle, even though, like, yeah, some of their backup movement was a bit sporadic, he was just able to add some pace, which is sort of what the Bulldogs were missing. Um, so, as I said, even though, like, movement wasn't the best, Hawthorn definitely had more of the marking game going,
Mm-hmm.
which did set up their forward half attack a bit better off. And they were a lot better at releasing handball chains as well. And it also just meant that their back half were able to push up a lot more. Um, oh, sorry, no. Okay. Sorry, that was just like another thing that they were able to do a bit better. So,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I feel like the Dogs were almost too keen to make this game into the scrap. They were trying to get the ball off ground level, onto ground level, and they were very good at it. But really, it was just the class of Hawthorn that sort of separated these two. They just got more of the chains going. More of the entries ended up being better results. And despite both teams having some pretty solid performers, I would only say that in terms of teams, one was a bit classier than the others.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's like the Dogs wanted to be were trying to keep their game going by not playing as much ground level, by trying to
Mm,
keep the ball in continuous movement.
mm. Well, sorry, yeah, like I meant Hawthorn took more likes.
Yeah, sorry, that's what
I
I
get what
meant.
you mean though. They were like,
That's why I stopped. I was like, hang on, no, that's not correct.
yeah. No, I get you. It was like because I think the point it's trying to make is like the Bulldogs were going for territory, but trying to put everything to the ground, try and stop Hawthorn's movement that way. Because Hawthorn they did try to resist some of Hawthorn's movement. Like defending transition was never the Bulldogs' MO or
Yeah,
their strong point. But I didn't feel like they were like running loose or anything. But it was really just I think the game was just played in an area which didn't suit the Bulldogs. Like it was definitely a game that just didn't feel on their
yeah,
terms, despite the small
they're
margin.
not. It's not that they're like a stoppage team because they're not. They're very much. They have a similar style to Hawthorn, but Hawthorn play
Mm.
it so much better and so much cleaner, rather than trying to force
Yeah,
scrappy on ground contests. And Hawthorn much prefer to have
yeah,
that fast movement.
yeah. I think the major difference is, and that's sort of what I made from the back half comparison, is the Bulldogs want to put it forward at any cost to set up a forward half game going. Whereas Hawthorn will work it out from the back half. They don't mind taking a bit of control, maybe having less possessions,
Mm,
but choosing moments to burst off the half back.
yeah,
Um, whereas the Bulldogs, as I said, because they're so willing to put it forward, they get sometimes moments where that sort of thing just ends up into more territory conceded.
yeah.
Um, because although they can dominate from the ground level, up against some teams and just in some situations, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Um, Jumping over to the individuals, though, and speaking of Hawthorn, that's where we're starting with big
Mm.
man Marbior Chol. He made his mark pretty much right off the bat and continued to have a really solid impact, like pretty much in all four quarters, is the words that I'm kind of looking for. He kicked 4 goals from 11 disposals, 10 effective, 90.9% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 3 marks with all of them inside 50, 6 score involvement, 16 pressure acts, 4 1%, and 3 spoils. Josh Ward was immense for with ball movement and pressure, finishing with 28 touches, 21 of them effective, equating to 75% efficiency, 13 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, 7 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 5 score involvements, 5 tackles, 21 pressure acts, 11 ground ball gets, and 444 metres gained. And then Lloyd Meek won out against Tim English convincingly in the ruck. He got 48 hitouts with 15 to advantage and 15 disposals, 12 contested possessions, 5 marks, 4 contested, and 3 intercepts. 3 inside 50s, 5 clearances, a behind, 5 score involvements, 6 tackles, 16 pressure acts, 6 1%ers, and 5 spoils. For the Dogs, Ed Richards was very solid in the middle with movement and transition. He collected 25 touches, 6 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 7 score involvements, 7 tackles, 25 pressure acts, and 524 metres gained. Then James O'Connell repelled what he could in defence, finishing with 13 disposals, 11 of them effective, equating to 84.6% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 10 intercepts, 5 marks, 4 of them being intercept marks, 3 tackles, 7 1%ers, and 6 spoils. Jumping over to our injuries really quickly. The Warpedo, James Warple, of course, came off the ground with a corked leg. Hopefully it's not too bad. They go into the bye this week, I think. It's either this week or next week. So hopefully he'll be right to go. And for the MRO, I may as well touch on this straight away because there is a lot of these, unfortunately, this week. Connor Nash was fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire.
Oh, it's back. And yeah, I know some of the games in the future have a fair few of these, but yeah, as I said, just keeps on happening, Blaze. You'd think they'd learn.
You'd think they would. Maybe the umpires need to wear more brighter colours so they could be seen more.
Maybe. Maybe they need to wear the Gold Coast jerseys.
Maybe they do.
The bright pink.
Yeah, maybe they really, really do.
Yeah. Just touching back on the individuals, I do want to say, last month, even though Hawthorn's been a bit up and down, Marvy Ocho, it's been really impressive. Like, he's not the best forward in the comp, but for what he's asked to do in that forward line, he has provided for the last month and a bit. And yeah, I just think it needs to be acknowledged because, obviously only one win in that time period. I think he's gotten a bit of respect from the commentators, but I just wanted to make a bit of an extra point because I think this is the most consistent I've seen him in a year so far.
Yeah, I agree. He's really stepped up in this past month. I think he's finally found the way that he wants to go about playing his footy, and it's been really solid to watch. He has been like really, really important to the Hawthorn forward line, especially with Cal Shadir being in and out at the moment. Jack Gunston, obviously, probably pretty much playing on borrowed time. So he's kind of been the key mainstay at the moment. Him and Dylan Moore predominantly. So they're just kind of working through what they can with that mixture of a forward line.
I was gonna say, even Dylan Moore, like he's been a bit up and down. I should have checked that. Like, I would imagine there's a fairly big gap between Scholl and Gunston and the rest of the goal scorers for Hawthorn. Their small forwards have been very sporadic this year.
They have.
Ginnivan's been alright, but he's needed to move up to have
Ginnivan's been playing more midfield time.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that'll be interesting. But yeah, just a bit of food for thought there.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, next game on the list. So going over to the Adelaide Oval for a Friday night clash between the Crows and the Lions.
Yes, and this is where the theme starts coming in for this week because we are talking about a bit of inaccuracy. There was 2 quarters that defined this game. The first quarter, 0-6 to Adelaide to 2-3 to Brisbane. It looked like the Crows kicked themselves out of it early. And it almost defined the sort of game for them. But in the last quarter, 5 straight to 0-9 as Adelaide came back against it. I realised I forgot to do the score for the first game, so we're going to go to... so Adelaide, the final score was 10-8, 68 to 8-15, 63. We'll quickly touch the last game. That was 8-11-59 Western Bulldogs to 12-9, 81 Hawthorn. Apologies about that.
Happens every week.
Yeah, so... back on this game, and yeah, it was fairly even in the first quarter. Even though Adelaide did waste their chances, but Brisbane ended up getting a bit more ground control for the rest of the game. And as that, Adelaide sort of got their burst from quicker transition. The biggest pain for Brisbane was how even their scoring was if they had only kicked straight. A nice 11 scores from stoppage and turnover translated to a very underwhelming 4-7 and 1-7 from each. I'm sorry, no, 4-7 each from stoppage and turnovers, and 1-7 was their score from back half transition
Oh yeah.
time 9. So even though Adelaide weren't set up the way they wanted to, it was very much the opportunistic genius of Ben Keys and Josh Rochelle that got Adelaide over the line. And even though their midfield overall, inside and out, got beaten, I feel like they put a lot of ground pressure to make things harder for Brisbane Lions.
Yeah.
And did force a lot of the rush possessions that didn't help Brisbane convert some of their entries. Because, as I said, we've talked about this, and like Adelaide's midfield, they tend to get beaten sometimes.
Mhm.
And this was like a bit of that case. But I felt like they put in that defensive pressure still to make sure that even though they were a bit off, it wasn't the difference between this game.
Yeah, I completely agree. The fact that Adelaide were able to completely flip the game on its head after that third quarter, by kicking accurately, be able to force a lot of turnovers in that midfield and quickly get a transition going, to like really holding Brisbane very well in their defense, forcing them to end up kicking all these behinds and really having an influence on the score overall is really, really solid. It shows that this team has improved massively and that they are, I would say at this point, genuine top 8 contenders.
Yeah, because as I said, we obviously had that really good year for Adelaide in 2023, where again, one of the best offenses in the league, but we just saw defensively, they would let those moments slip. If games went completely on their terms, obviously they won a lot. But yeah, we just saw them sort of not quite overall be set up. But as I said, even though 2024 was a wasted year, that improvement on defense seems to be invaluable. Coming into this year, as I said, I think it's just won them a few more contests that we've just been expecting them to lose. And I sort of make this point in the next one, where it's like the difference between the two teams, the lack of threatening entries by Brisbane.
Yeah.
And, both defenses I actually thought were very stout. They forced a lot of general play shots. It's just that Brisbane's forward line, Brisbane didn't favour their forwards, where Adelaide got a lot more of their forwards involved in the game, even if the greasy conditions made it harder for some of them to have an impact. Like players like Thorpe, I think he had a moment where he kicked a goal. Fogarty wasn't really that much involved. I'm not even sure if Tex played this game. Oh yeah, he played. He kicked a goal.
Yeah, he was in there.
He wasn't really that sided all that much. Leicester did an okay job running with him, but you know what I mean? It just felt like, even though those players, didn't really have the best game, like that, they did a few small things, like, put it into the advantage of smaller forwards. But yeah, as I said, on the flip side though, even with some of the missed shots, it's still a pain because it was 12 extra inside 50s for Brisbane.
Yeah.
And only about half of those, sorry, that's just in the last quarter. That was 12 extra inside 50s when Brisbane were rallying to win. But it really felt like only half of them looked dangerous. And Worrell and Keane were just enjoying themselves, not having to be stretched too much. Which was good because, as I said, Adelaide were getting smashed in the clearances, so they were losing that territory. And I will say, even though they lost this game, Darcy Ford had tons of influence in the last quarter, as did, I think it was Josh Dunkley, especially in the last quarter. Like, they really did try to get a game on their terms when it was there to be won.
Yeah,
and as I said, Will Ashcroft too was also having a nice cameo in that last quarter. So it was all going well from their midfield. That was dominant in that last quarter, but they just couldn't get it done going forward. I mean, there's no need to really explain that 0-8 in the last quarter. Oh, sorry, 0-9 is just,
it's dreadful.
In such a close game. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that's all there really is to say about that. It's a game that Adelaide might not have I won't say they didn't deserve to win, because from what Brisbane were giving them, they defended that very well.
Mm-hmm.
But Brisbane still should have got more than what they got
Yeah,
from that. They
yeah, I
had enough
agree.
of the game on their terms to get the 4 points there, but they just didn't.
Yeah, I agree. Adelaide 100% deserved the win, but Brisbane should have put
Hmm.
them away. Brisbane should have been a lot more threatening with their conversions. Obviously, 0-9 kind of says a lot. Um,
Yeah,
but like even earlier in the game, like there were easy misses that they should have hit,
exactly.
and etc. etc.
Yeah, that's 100%. Like it shouldn't even have been a sniff. Um, the first stuff was all right, but that third quarter there was still a bit of inaccuracy because there was still 5 behinds kicked. Um, but yeah, as I said, from a lot of clearance control, a lot of the game was set up the way that Brisbane likes. They just couldn't deal much with it.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, jumping over to individuals, and Ben Keys, as you had mentioned before, was insanely influential. He kicked 3 goals from 20 disposals, 16 of them effective, equating to 80% efficiency. 8 contested possessions, 7 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 8 score involvements, 5 tackles, 20 pressure acts, and 372 meters gained. Josh Worrell, as you had also mentioned, was important off intercept, finishing with 18 touches, 14 of them effective, equating to 77.8% efficiency. 10 intercepts, 6 marks, with 5 of them being intercept marks, 11 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, and 4 spoils. And then Jake Saligo was absolutely, like, he was so important with pressure. That's what I was trying to say. In the midfield, he collected 19 disposals, 11 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 3 clearances, 13 tackles, and 35 pressure acts. For the Lions, Will Ashcroft was immense, finishing with 31 touches, 14 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 8 clearances, 4 score involvements, 7 tackles, 18 pressure acts, 12 ground ball gets, and 334 meters gained. And then, as you had also mentioned, Darcy Ford had a really, really, really strong matchup against Riley O'Brien. Beat him out in some of the metrics. Didn't beat him out in all of them, but it was a really, really fun contest to watch between the two. He finished with 47 hitouts, 14 to advantage, and 12 disposals, 9 of them effective, equating to 75% efficiency, 11 contested possessions, 7 clearances are behind, 8 score involvements, 4 1%ers, and 2 spoils. And then briefly shout out to Brisbane debutant Ty Gallop, who I believe they picked up in the 2024 draft. He finished with 6
Mhm.
touches, 4 contested possessions, 4 tackles, and 8 pressure acts.
Yeah, exactly. And just to go on, Dustin, it's like I think, and in terms of that matchup, and again, it is one of the pains where Adelaide have to fix up because Riley O'Brien, he wins almost every year in terms of pure hitouts, but he won it 50 of them. Only 6 went to advantage,
Yeah.
and Adelaide did struggle with the centre clearances. He doesn't get many himself, and he just doesn't get involved in the game enough. Like he's the opposite to a lot of modern ruckmen, but he just doesn't have that hitting craft. It's really weird. Honestly, I don't like to be too negative on a player, but if I was the Crows, I would be looking to at least bring a more solid second ruckman. They do like to pinch it with Phil Thorpe a lot. I don't think he really took that many hitouts in that game.
I hear
But yeah,
I
I'd
hear
like to see him mix them up a bit more.
there's a ruck that's playing across town that could maybe use some games.
Who knows? Maybe. I mean, they might take both.
They
Take
could
Luke
if
and
Vicentini keeps,
Solid.
taking the #1 job as
Yeah,
well.
he had another solid week. We'll get to that a bit later,
We
but
will.
yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, so apart from that, the only other thing is, I think this Brisbane deserve to lose one of these games. They've just been getting across the line, mucking around these things, and they got found out. I don't think Fagans will be too disappointed with that. Um, he did say that they deserve to win through the metrics. Again, I'd argue that's a bit dubious, but he definitely will be trying to send a message to the lads that you can't just be coasting. You have to build a
Yeah.
tiny bit, even if it, as I said, it's understandable not showing all your cards this early in the season. Backing your, uh, as I said, you still got to, when the pressure's applied, make the most of those moments. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Like, especially when it says across most of the metrics that you were beating Adelaide convincingly, you just can't convert.
Mm.
That's where the issue lays, realistically.
Yeah,
But
and look, yeah, it
yeah,
was 60 inside 50s to 47. 109 ground ball gets to 90. I think clearances, yeah, that was 55 to 36. Mark 73 to 62. So, yeah, a lot of it. And obviously 29 shots to 20. It was almost a 10 scoring shot differential,
yeah.
and they just didn't win.
The last thing that we need to touch on is the MRO. James Peatling will sadly miss one match for a dangerous tackle against Lockie Neal. I did watch this. His head did hit the ground. Lockie Neal was cleared
Yeah.
of injury, thankfully, or concussion. He's all good to go, thankfully. But yeah, it was a very rough tackle. It didn't look like there was much into it because of the fact that he actually held the body fairly. He just didn't bring him to ground the correct
Yeah,
way. So that's why it's
exactly. It
only
was more just
one match.
a lapse of technique rather than extreme vigor or dangerous intent.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, time to jump over to our first Saturday game, a game that there isn't really much to talk about in terms of my hopes and dreams right now, but it's Richmond and Sydney at the MCG.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a fairly quick breakdown because there really wasn't too much. As I said, unfortunately, sometimes we see this with I guess we'll still put. I mean, they're still bottom four. Struggling teams. You put in a few good solid efforts. You come up against an opponent where you should match up well, but they just run out of steam
Mm-hmm.
because they really didn't put much of a whimper against a still very inefficient but very dominant Sydney, who just ran all over them after a solid first quarter by the Tigers. Uh, I think it was Taranto? No, Prestia that had the huge first quarter.
Yes.
It looked like they were actually going to do a bit in this matchup. But afterwards, yeah, it was just not much. Sydney were just moving the ball from the back half, pretty uncontested. While the midfield group generated most of the scoring like they normally do. Richmond's defense, they couldn't stop marks or ground ball gets in their back line, and really were only able to create intercepts as a form of defensive pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was one of the rare games where I think Richmond's backline sort of lowered their colours a bit.
I mean, I can tell you
But
why.
again,
You can thank a
go for it.
certain player called James Jordan for that. He's become one of Sydney's
Yeah,
premier taggers and shutdown players, and he was tasked with dealing with Boston during this game.
that's right. Yeah, because honestly, it's funny because I saw a lot of Australian talk for Boston, and I was a bit half and half about it. I do think there's parts where I would put him in, but there's a few teams where I would, be tossing up that player. But he was absolutely beaten that night. So
Mm-hmm.
um, it did seem to rattle Richmond's defense a bit. Um, but in terms of intercepts from defensive pressure, even that for Richmond didn't result in much because it unfortunately translated into 1-8. Again, misfires as per the episode quote for Richmond. So smashed in territory, couldn't convert when they did get it in there. It was just a bad night for the Tigers.
Yeah, absolutely. It was not a pleasant game to watch, that's for sure. I was boots on ground for this. If anyone saw our socials, it did not go very well.
Yeah. So another player that did really well, and I was just looking through the stats and I saw this was funny. Nick Blakey, 31 kicks, and a few more possessions. Was all but double three players' total kicks for the night. And you could really see the difference with such a quality halfbacker. Well, I know Nick Blakey's not a halfbacker,
He kind
but
of plays a bit of
is he
everywhere.
he plays deep, but is involved in a lot of transition play.
Yeah.
Um, it just highlighted pain for them, which was that, when their defense is off, which, as I said, arguably it was in this match, then they sort of risk getting a lot of repeat inside 50s over and over because they are they are actually the worst team at transitioning deep from their back line, i.e. the back 50, to their forward 50.
Mm-hmm.
They're a lot better when they can get a few of their halfbackers involved in intercept, which, as I said, they did a bit. But yeah, as I said, their just distribution from that area was just more off than it normally is. And that lack of distributors added to a high turnover rate. Sydney got a lot of forward 50 turnovers. And, you can't put all the blame there because they do have just that lack of outside marking and tackling targets. So really, they're one of the teams that are struggling a bit on the wing, even though they've got a few players you sort of like down there. One of them obviously being Hugo Ralph-Smith.
Yes.
I'm not really sure how he did that game, but
He was all right.
he's been a player that's normally does his role week in, week out. But yeah, as I said, it's just like marking. A lot of their marks tend to be very, very deep or very, very well, I won't say up forward because they don't really, but yeah, as I said, unfortunately, yeah, it's just sort of hurt them a bit some games in transition. Whereas on the
Yeah.
flip side, even though Sydney have struggled this year, compared to last year, there was just so much more connected movement going on in their game.
Yeah, they managed to just generate from anywhere, really. They were always first to the ball, they were always immense pressure. They did do the old strategy of flooding. That did happen a fair few times, something that they used to be known for. That happened a lot against our backline and our forward line during this game, to great effect for Sydney because there was just always pressure on the ball wherever it went. And yeah, it's just their generation out of their back half really improved this week, and a lot of that does come
Yeah,
come from the lizard himself.
yeah, exactly. And I guess that's also the other thing for Richmond is that surprisingly, I know, because I still think their defense is really good, but they don't actually have that much back half pressure. You know what I mean? Like they're not a high tackling. Well, sorry, their defensive players aren't quite known for their tackling. They do force the turnovers, but it's more other players pushing up,
Yeah, that's right.
more than what's actually being generated from that. So although they've got some really nice tall defenders, they just need to work out on how to actually put a bit more pressure uh,
At ground level.
on, yeah, at ground level. Because as I said, once they actually win the contest, it gets a bit easier for them. And on the flip side, if it does, if there is a turnover between their defensive half and their forward half, they get burnt just very easily going back, which is to be expected from turnovers. But yeah, as I said, yeah, their defense is something that just likes to be set. Otherwise, they can still get exposed.
Yeah, exactly right. Jumping over to our individuals for the week, I do, of course, we've kind of already mentioned him a lot, but Nick Blakey, he was absolutely everywhere, doing absolutely everything.
Beautiful.
He finished with 34 disposals. As you mentioned, 31 of them were kicks. 26 effective, according to 76.5% efficiency, 7 intercepts, 10 marks, 8 inside 50s, a behind, 6 score involvements, 4 1%ers, 4 spoils, and 9 16 metres gained. James Jordan pushed up and kicked truly, as I had mentioned before. He was playing a tagging role on Vloston. He kicked 3-1 from 17 touches, 4 contested possessions, 7 marks with 4 of them inside 50, 4 inside 50s overall, 7 score involvements, 15 pressure acts. And James Rowbottom was a tackling machine through the midfield. He collected 15 disposals, 12 of them effective, equating to 80% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 6 intercepts, 4 inside 50s, 14 tackles, and 25 pressure acts. And I think for the first time, I actually mentioned a fourth player from one team rather than splitting it 3-2. And the fourth player for Sydney is Brodie Grundy because he completely outmatched Nankervis. Across all metrics, he won. So Grundy finished with 51 hitouts, 15 to advantage, and kicked 1-1 from 19 touches, 10 contested possessions, 5 marks, 5 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 7 score involvements, 6 tackles, 10 pressure acts, 3 1%ers, and 3 spoils. And then the only Richmond player that I mentioned that I thought could hold his head high is Tom Brown. I'm also a big fan of Sam Banks. I thought Banksy had a very solid game as well. But Brownie finished with 17 disposals, 13 of them effective, equating to 76.5% efficiency, 7 intercepts, 9 marks, with 4 of them being intercept marks, and 396 metres gained. Ryan Mansell was subbed off
Yeah.
at halftime due to a corky as well in the leg. That comes under the injury front. There wasn't much more else than that. It was fairly innocuous. No one else in trouble for it. And then the MRO, as I had mentioned before, there's a fair few of them this week. Isaac Heaney was fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire.
Hate to see it, especially by someone who is, you think a private schoolboy like Isaac Heaney, very much line, very rules and regulations followers, those private school boys, they should know. Be prim and proper enough not to bump into an umpire, but yet here we are.
Yet here we are.
Yeah. I must admit though, there have been a few weeks where you have sort of done four for, well, maybe not four, but like
No, it's normally been like 3-1, and we've just kind of casually talked about other players.
Yeah, but like West Coast, in some of their floggings, it's like, yeah, well, they've got like a debutant playing.
Oh,
so
yeah,
we'll just like
true.
put that in for
And we
the
just throw that
swap,
in.
so yeah, so we're not saying like this was like literally most one-sided content it was, but
Yeah, true.
honestly though, probably up there. Sydney, I think some of their made that this contest, I won't say closer than it should be. I think the final score actually reflects sort of the level of play by both teams. But yeah, Richmond just never really seemed into it after quarter time. Even Prestia, as I said, absolutely fantastic first, but sort of got a bit more attention after.
Yeah, he was really dominant in that first quarter.
Yeah, probably one of the better ones I saw, because I saw a bit of this first quarter.
Well, it's the same thing that I kind of said last week when they played the Giants, is that like when Prestia is in and he's fit, he makes that midfield so much better because it frees up Taranto and frees up Hopper, but all of them got attention by Sydney this week. They all like had some sort of run with player in some degree, and they just got beat out.
Yeah, well, it's easy to forget how hyped Prestia was early in his career. You might not remember it because I don't know how much you were paying in the draft attention of the draft at that time, but yeah, as I said, it really is only injuries that have derailed him. Anytime he's gotten on the park, he's actually been fairly well. His final career would probably be understated for how talented he actually is.
Yeah, soft tissue injuries really do get the best of you.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump over to our next game. Down at the Cattery, it's the Cats and the Suns.
Yes, and unfortunately, I do have to mention something that I talked about last week, and that was the 102 points that I was off about this game being a total score of 200 plus. A bit of a setback for those enjoyers of Cyric's random prediction of the week, but it was a wet contest. I backed up not being wet. I have no idea why I'd do that when we're talking about the fine state of Victoria, which often isn't fine.
Yeah, that's true.
But for the Cats, the wet weather sort of suited them. While they weren't exactly like ruthlessly dominant on ground level that we might see from teams that enjoy playing wet, they were a lot better at turning hardball wins into uncontested play. And they had a lot more control with their time of possession. Outside of the Suns' midfield, I thought no one could really get into the game offensively, being very restricted, as ironically, it was actually their small ground level that really couldn't get involved in the wet conditions. And so I can't remember exactly the spread of goal kickers, but I think a lot of their tolls actually kicked in some of the goals. I think they got one from Ben King, one from, here's the other one. Jed Walters.
Yes, that's right. I think so. I think that's correct.
Yeah, and Ben Long also got a goal. Bailey Humphries as well. Yeah, so you know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, on ground levels, they really weren't presented. And, as I said, sort of maybe, the flip side. And what I thought was really weird is that Sam Flanders, after playing so well in the wet, against Freo, played on the wing this game. It was a bit baffling to me, but anyway, as I said, all in all, they really didn't have it. And on the flip side, unfortunately, the one weakness is to the Suns' defense, which isn't actually. It's more the sort of weaknesses you get by just managing an AFL team, and that is that they were a bit too tough for the conditions.
Yeah.
They lost the ground ball, 450 ground ball count, just to back up those 2 points, 16-9. As Stengel, Myers, and Manor, I think, sort of had the game going in their direction, where I said it was just no one for the Gold Coast. Even in the midfield, the 16 and 11 ground ball gets from Holmes and Atkins gave Geelong some very nice territory, and all of this sort of combined into a very comfortable win by the Cats, despite this game not getting away from the Suns till late. The final score being 9-7, 61 Geelong to 5-7, 37 Suns. Their worst scoring contest for the year.
Yeah, and I kind of and on one side I did kind of expect this because it's cold and it's wet. Like I did expect the Suns to kind of underperform this week. But I wasn't expecting it to still be so close up until again that fourth quarter. It always seems to be a close contest between each game so far until there's like a switch flipped in that fourth.
Yeah, I guess it's like a byproduct of just scoring being so late. I should say that I think it got confirmed that this score was the lowest scoring since 1970s odd. The first time for these quarter lengths to happen in a long time. So yeah, it was just a very interesting round. Again, you can also blame that on bad Melbourne weather.
Yeah.
So for the games in Melbourne, a lot of them were, but there's a few other games where you couldn't really use that as an excuse. So one thing that was coming from this contest, while the game's conditions may not have produced an interesting contest, it did actually set a record for the most contests in the game. That being stoppages, of course, which was 154. Score from stoppages were actually quite low. Although Geelong's 4-4 was probably on par for the course considering the conditions. It was the Suns' 1-goal-3 that was quite lackluster, and probably another area of the ground, even though their forward line wasn't that involved.
Yeah.
That was also a bit of the problem. I wouldn't blame the Suns midfield for this game, but it was a tiny bit off as well. And even though a lot of pundits would pick the Suns midfield over Geelong in a line draft, whereas you just picked an overall midfield going down the list. I think most people would pick Suns over Geelong. Not me. I think Geelong are still top 4. But they just don't produce the stats of a top 4 midfield. Something that really helps them at stoppage, though, I will say, is the evenness of their players.
Yeah.
Almost all of their players that attend stoppage tend to do something. So there were 7 players with 4+ stoppage clearances in this game, and 8 players from the midfield unit with 5+ tackles. Sorry, what I should say is 8 players that ascended a centre's bounce for Geelong had 5+ tackles, I think. But anyway, so a lot of pressure in there. And even on the outside, everyone except an early injured Neil took a mark, which is actually really impressive in these conditions. So again, that helped a lot with the outside sort of movement. Whereas the Gold Coast, outside of Anderson and Rao, they were just okay stat-wise. And it was good that they can get a decent time of possession for some periods of the game. It definitely wasn't a game where they were just steamrolled, but it definitely was off for the Gold Coast. And it was pretty much in every line. It wasn't a dismal performance. The conditions didn't suit them, but they definitely have a bit to work through on Monday. They want to have gotten more out of this game than they did.
100%. You were expecting with both of these teams being such hot form, you were expecting it to be a much more intense matchup. Even with the conditions, you're expecting it to be.
Yeah.
Obviously, there were a lot of stoppages, so we know that there was a lot of ground ball play out work in the midfield. However, that doesn't equate to what both the teams really wanted at the end of the day. The Suns, the Geelong pretty much had their way with the game for most of it. The Suns, tried their hardest, but they just couldn't contend. No, I definitely feel like it was more the cold rather than just the wet, because obviously they played a ton of wet
Yeah,
games up in the Gold Coast, um, so they have that kind of experience, but that also comes with humidity when it comes to Queensland rain.
yeah,
Whereas down in Geelong, they're up against the bay. It's cold as hell. Like,
yeah. I think it's also a bit to do with system because again, we know the Gold Coast, and they still technically matched Geelong in scores off turnover. But I think that sort of harder marking conditions, it sort of limited their ability to bounce off intercept. Because both teams had a healthy amount of it. It was 72 Geelong intercepts to 67
mm,
Gold Coast. But yeah, as I said, it was just a lot more limited transition for Gold Coast. Even though, it wasn't that stagnant. It just felt like it broke down a few more times than we're used to seeing. It didn't feel as lethal, really. And it wasn't just because the forward 50 was sort of breaking down for them. Uh, Overall, in this game, the forward 50 was definitely the worst area for them.
oh yeah,
But the midfield and defense just had those tiny bits of problems, which made everything seem a bit off kilter.
yeah, I completely agree. All right, jumping over to our individuals, and speaking of forward 50, Geelong's forward 50 were pretty solid. Starting with Tyson Stengel, who kicked truly, slotting 4 goals from 11 disposals, 4 contested possessions, 3 marks, all of them inside 50, 5 score involvements, 5 tackles, and 14 pressure acts. Irishman Mark O'Connor was a pressure machine, finishing with 21 disposals, 17 of them effective, equating to 81% efficiency, 14 contested possessions, 7 inside 50, 7 clearances, 3 score involvements, 10 tackles, 23 pressure acts, 3 1%ers, and 360 meters gained. Max Holmes was very dominant in the midfield, also collecting 40 disposals, 19 contested possessions, 6 marks, 7 inside 50s, 10 clearances, 2 behinds, 6 score involvements, 5 tackles, 17 pressure acts, 16 ground ball gets, and 861 meters gained. Jumping over to the Suns, and Jared Witz was dominant in the ruck, getting 52 hitouts, 16 of them to advantage, and 10 touches, 8 contested possessions, 4 clearances, 3 score involvements, 4 tackles, 11 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, and 4 spoils. And then Matt Rowell was still doing Matt Rowell things, as he normally does. He kicked a goal from 24 disposals, 17 of them effective, equating to 70.8% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 10 clearances, 4 score involvements, 11 tackles, 37 pressure acts, and 541 meters gained. As you had briefly mentioned before, Shannon Neal did go off the field with an ankle concern. He was subbed out, I think about half time, or it was like I wasn't super early in the game, but also wasn't super late, so I think it might have been around the halfway mark. I can't remember. And then Noah Anderson had got hit with a rough tackle by Tom Stewart. Nothing came out of it in the MRO, but he was subbed out with chest pains, not like heart pains, but just like soreness, I think, for the most part. So I believe they got scans on it yesterday as we're recording this, but I haven't seen an official outcome as of yet as to said injury.
Yeah, because I think that was exacerbated by the hit that they looked at. It was a very crunching hit by who was it? I actually have no idea
I'm
who
pretty
it
sure it was
was.
Stewart.
Stewart, yeah, Stewart, yeah, that's right. And honestly, I can see why it got off. It was just like it was one of these things where like the bump itself was fairly fair, and it was just the awkward landing that was a bit out of Stewart's control.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I think the initial hit was actually what triggered his case. So even though it was a legal and fair bump in that regard, it still did cause Anderson a bit of pain.
Yeah.
And just to finish it off, I must admit, we'll do it lightly because I'm not sure. I was tempted to do it this week, but again, I was feeling a bit off on the weekend. I was actually going to lightly think about doing a by vibes halfway All Australian just because I've been seeing food. But yeah, I was going to say Max Holmes, he didn't make All Australian last year. I thought he should have.
Mm-hmm.
He's now in the midfield. how much money do you think or willing to put on that they're going to pop him on the halfback line this year? You know what I mean? Like, oh, he's collected more pill and all that, and he's still like a halfback, and we put him there, even though he's basically an inside midfield, true and true now.
I reckon
I
there's a
reckon
fair
it's an
chance of
almost
it.
certainty.
Yeah. But I mean, you also got to compare that to all of the other really solid players at the moment too. Like they're like the midfields across pretty much across the league are like they've got some players even in the weaker teams that are really really solid, and you've got plenty of those players as well off of halfback. So I think that he will make the All Australian. I just don't know where you put him.
Yeah, well, I don't think he makes it as a pure midfielder.
No, I think he'd have to probably fit in the halfback.
Yeah, so yeah, we'll see for that if you have any thoughts. And as I said, I'll try and bring it for you next week. Fingers hoping. Hopefully, I won't feel too bad during the week. But, yeah.
Well,
as long as I don't have like appendicitis and I'm in hospital, I will try and make a
don't jinx it.
Vibes. Yeah, All Australian for next week to just.
Well, we go back to 7 games next week, so we'll have a little bit more time.
Yeah, that's thankfully. A little spot there.
Before we jump over to our next game, there was an MRO, of course, for this game as well, and as I had mentioned, there's a lot of them. Jack Martin and Joel Jeffrey were both fined $1,000 each for contact with an umpire.
Yeah, hopefully in separate injury. Like, I would imagine they would be close to playing on each other. Maybe it was like a dual clothesline.
I can't remember. I think the report said they were in different quarters.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking maybe it was the old backward step ladder. Jack Martin does the push from above. Joel Jeffrey gets on his knees. Just don't bully umpires.
Speaking of Jack Martin, actually, just a bit of a side note. This was Jack Martin's first game as a cat, having made his way over in the off-season, either this off-season or the one before it. He looked pretty solid.
Yeah. So, as I said, I think it was a bit like not conditions, but again, it was just like Geelong's ground level, providing a lot more pressure, and more systematically better than Gold Coast. So Jack Martin sort of fit in that bill, did his role. I don't think he kicked a goal, but looked fairly solid.
Yeah, I agree. All right, jumping up now to New South Wales. Actually, it's not even New South Wales. It's the ACT. We're going to Canberra, where the Giants host Port Adelaide at Manuka Oval.
Yeah, head into a cold part of the world. This was a single-digit temperature game. And while it wasn't the blockbuster that they maybe were making during the schedule, might have been expected when, pitting 2 top 4 teams from last year up against each other. Which, to be fair, if they did that, they should have known that Port and West just don't match up well together in terms of interesting contest. It was at least an interesting game, a very defensively heavy arm wrestle. And while it wasn't good watching, I think Port fans will be thankful that they seem to have patched up a few things, especially their back half turnovers. Bless Farrell being back. He really made a huge difference. And although attacking was very sparse and very, very wide, I think, and I'll make a point of this later, I think in terms of this game, it was sort of forgivable because I think that's just the way you got to approach the Giants. Because in this game, the Giants had some excellent defensive half intercepts. Sam Taylor, especially, but also Jack Buckley, were absolutely ruthless early.
They were.
Their transition wasn't that great. Not them particularly, but overall. But the Giants did get up to an early lead. Probably also due to a couple of free kicks from ruck contests. Although he did have a solid game. Vicentini and I think Finlayson gave away a couple of cheapies that helped GWS get a few early goals. I think one to Riccardi and another to maybe Hogan or something like that. Anyway, but unfortunately for the Giants, they wasted their entries and field dominance, but seemed to be, around the ground more threatening than Port for the first half, I would say. But Port did a good job of withholding their attacks. But then in the second half, they went for a Cole Canberra night's sleep. Their midfield absolutely disappeared on them, sans Tom Green, and their lack of forward distribution, letting the tolls for Port actually get into the game and dominate, while not presenting at ground level. An early injury to Toby Green, who bravely, after getting a massive corky, tried to battle out the first half, but had to be subbed off because once you started resting on that hugely called knee, not knee, thigh in that night, he really struggled for movement.
Yeah, that's right.
Unfortunately, he left the game. They couldn't get much on the ground. And then Port's forward half started actually. They could just convert enough chances, edge out a hard-earned 16 points. The final score being 7-8-50 to the Giants to 9-12, 66 Port Adelaide. And yeah, it's just looked like the Giants had the same problem as last year. And it's really that if they aren't firing in their forward line, they really have to test.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just Port were actually better suited to grind. Yeah, it was very ugly, but Port did the things required to win this game.
They did. It was very surprising because you'd think being at Canberra, like the Giants play there way too much. They play a couple times a year up in the ACT. So you would think they would have a lot more.
For Port.
Yeah.
Monica.
Yeah, that's right. So you'd think they would have a lot more of an advantage. But no, the Port really did play a style that worked in their favor. They were managed to transition fairly well across, and you're about to mention this, but through a style that you don't really see from them. Like normally you see them play a little bit more like going through the corridor, a lot more grunt in that sort of transition. But they went wide this week, and it was very much a style that I don't think the Giants were even expecting them to play either. And it worked out in their favor.
Yeah, and this is what I was going to say, is that it was very obvious. And look, Port actually have performed this before, but maybe not so much in transition, but like in terms of forward entries. Like they are, and I hate this with a passion, they do utilize a lot of wide leads and using central chains to then actually move the ball boundary side. So their entry before, like they'll start a chain, they'll like risk a few handballs through the middle.
Yeah.
Just to have that like 75-meter to 50-meter kick into the inside 50 B boundary side. However, like Richmond last week found, this type of offense actually mitigates a lot of back half movement for the Giants. And over the last 2 weeks, the Giants have only managed 9 shots from the back half, turning a strength into basically a non-factor for them. We mentioned Buckley and Taylor. They're nearly unstoppable as a force. But if their 4 turnovers are wide, they'll dish off the first possession to Lockie Whitfield or wait, is it Lockie Whitfield and Lockie Ash?
Yes,
Have
it
they
is.
both got the same first name?
You are correct.
Crazy. I don't know why I find that amazing, but as I said, it's wide. And again, we've said there's a problem. Their marking targets between the back half and the wing aren't really that prevalent. So when they're not able to burst out straight away, because obviously when you start from that corner, Port were very good at keeping him hemmed boundary side. So the run and carry was eliminated. So again, they got a lot of possessions, and I don't even think they like turned the ball over all that much, or were particularly bad with the options that they chose. It's just they limited Whitfield and Ash's possessions to not be that good, and that really hurt them. As I said, I think Whitfield was a bit better than Ash. I think Ash still had a couple of moments they probably regret in the team thing, but I do think it was sort of brought on by Port. And as we, talk about, on, transition, Port were still, going wide, utilising the fact that they had a high advantage. And, a couple of their wingers did take a while to get into the game, especially Jace Burgoyne. Boak was okay, but he sort of, had a couple of moments in the first half where he wouldn't really like before being very solid. But yeah, as I said, it was just like, even though numbers wide. You know, uh, it wasn't that much of clearance overall in the middle.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of transition in the middle, it's just that Port had better outside. They mitigated that. And the fact that they could dominate from the centre just meant that, yeah, as I said, they could get the game on. Because in the middle, they were quite good.
Yes, they were.
As I said, Connor Rosie coming into a few more contests probably had the best game in his season. I've been a bit critical at him, so I want to make sure I mention that. Zach Bowder's absolutely fantastic. Willem Drew providing the pressure again.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was just a much more well-rounded. It helped some of their outside players get into it as well. Joe Richards as well. He was quite fantastic. So yeah, it was just a bit of better connection. Whereas that, even though Giants had a few players that performed very well. Yeah, it just wasn't that much connection between them. And a lot of the best players of the Giants were from the back half of the round.
Yeah,
Himmelberg played fantastically. Ash still had a fairly solid disposal game, as did Whitfield. Buckley and Taylor, again, absolutely. And yeah, as I said, apart from a few opportunistic goals, I think that was the other downside too, is that, in terms of, really solid key defensive games, like their forwards actually put in enough for them. 2 goals to Hogan, 2 goals to Riccardi, one goal to Cadman. Cadman could have converted a bit more, to be fair, but, that's enough in these conditions to set up a good game. They just didn't have anything else. It was a bit like the Suns, really.
Yeah, like they really, really struggled. Well, the Giants this week definitely struggled more in their midfield, even with Brent Daniels back. Granted, he did start as a sub, so he did come on when Toby Green went off.
Very good when he came on.
But yeah, he was so good. But it just wasn't.
Yeah.
Just wasn't enough for them this week. Port stepped up. Their midfield stepped up.
Yeah. And even like you might say, oh well, they're playing Nicholas Madden in the ruck. I actually thought he did quite well.
Well, I do mention him this week because he did do.
It took a while for Vicentini to actually get into it, and honestly, for a debut ruck, 26 hitouts isn't too bad when your opponent gets 30.
Yeah, no, they were fairly evenly matched. And I will touch on that in a moment. But I'm going to start with Port Adelaide's midfield because we did hype them up, so it's only fair to pay them their dues. Starting with Zach Butters, of course, he was absolutely dominant in the midfield. Finished with 32 disposals, 24 effective, equating to 75% efficiency. 21 contested possessions, 6 intercepts, 7 inside 50s, 12 clearances, 7 tackles, 16 pressure acts, 16 ground ball gets, and 453 metres gained. Willem Drew was solid pressure, as you had mentioned before. Collected 18 touches, 9 contested possessions, 6 clearances, 10 tackles, 18 pressure acts. Alir was very important in defence for Port Adelaide. He finished with 14 disposals, 11 of them effective, equating to 78.6% efficiency. 4 contested possessions, 8 intercepts, 4 marks, 10 1%ers, 10 spoils, and 100% time on ground. And then, as we had just talked about, debutant Nicholas Madden contended really well with Dante Vicentini. He collected 26 hitouts, with 5 of them to advantage, and 15 touches, 11 of them effective, equating to 73.3% efficiency. 11 contested possessions, 4 clearances, 4 tackles, 16 pressure acts. And then, as we've kind of hyped up, the Giants' defense was phenomenal for the most part, and Sam Taylor was the key, like one of the big keys to that. He finished with 19 disposals, 17 of them effective, equating to 89.5% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 16 intercepts, 9 marks with 4 of them contested marks and 7 of them intercept marks, 12 1%ers, 11 spoils, and 100% time on ground. As we had mentioned before, with injuries, Toby Green did come off with a hip because he was pretty corked. He just couldn't do anything about that. So Brent Daniels came on, of course. And then MRO, Tom Green, fined $1,875 for, you guessed it, contact with an umpire.
Maybe I shouldn't have put him in the performing midfield. I know he had a good game on the field, but you can't be running.
Yeah, I know. When you touch an umpire, it kind of ruins your statistics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I will also say Port were very set in defence. I know I mentioned a lot of that was due to GWS's entries and some of the pressure applied, like them not getting the but they did hold off, especially in the first half when they were a bit more threatening, a bit more potent with their movement. And I want to say, it's actually funny though, because I was looking at the stats, because I was just looking up for another game. Who the worst quote unquote one-on-one defender. And it's one of those things where I know it, but it's still surprising to see. Everyone rags on the Radicalea. He's actually one of the better one-on-one defenders. Makes some brain-dead decisions.
Oh, yeah.
But is up there. But yeah, Aaliyah is only like, is it like a 37.5% loss rate? It's just, we've seen in games where sometimes this is really bad. Like he did actually Cadman. Where because it's an aggressive interceptor, if things aren't systematically right for Port, it can snowball very fast for a player like Aaliyah. When you're trying to generate interception, but the ball is just coming back with force. So you're playing a bit off your man anyway. You know what I mean? So this is like the difference back up, where if Port can clean themselves up, a player like Aaliyah can just focus on what he does absolutely best, which is finding aggressive interceptors. He's one of the more aggressive interceptors, maybe not best interceptor in the league, but he is one of the more aggressive. And then, as I said, leaving someone like Zerk Thatcher, Bergman was also good defensively. He's been a bit off at times, but really held his own. And yeah, as I said, it just allows Port's defense to be a bit more systematically solid than the absolute blowouts that they've been having when they've just halfback.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, let's jump over to our Sunday games, starting with our first official AFL game, because we don't count the practice games, in Bunbury, hosted by North Melbourne as they take on the Eagles.
Yes, and it was a spoonbowl, and this one did remind us very frequently it was played by 17th and 18th. This was a close but frustrating contest to watch by either supporter base, as the Roos were absolutely dominated in the first three quarters, spending only 35% time in their forward half. When I say forward half, I mean forward of the centre circle. That's how those statistics are measured. So they had absolutely none of the ball. But the big bang for the Eagles, that it took them 34 entries for their first goal. I don't know if that's a record or something, but it was very fitting that it was kicked by, I forgot who it was, but it was number 34 for the Eagles. I think that's the other Williams. Is that Jack Williams? I can't remember. Anyway, it's whoever 34 is for the Eagles.
We'll look at it later.
But anyway, I think that's like one of the rarest times where an inside 50 would match the first goal kick by a player in the 30s. Possibly the first time in history that's ever happened. Don't have the stats to back it up, but again, it was 20 minutes into the second quarter after 8 behind. It was hard to shoot at goals. It was hard for the Eagles to get shots on goals to be accurate, but it was also due to the crap inside 50s. And the Roos defense being surprisingly decent. Again, McDonald did his job, and Pink was fairly well, and they both kept Ryan and Allen quite respectively. The Eagles also had a record number of tackles inside 50. I think their highest for the year, highest for a while, and I think they broke a first quarter record. But again, this was also just due to not winning enough forward 50 contests flat out.
Yeah.
So a lot of entries were just going to ground. They needed to put the pressure on. They could keep it contained, but they could not convert that into enough scoring shots. But then, as we mentioned, the Roos who looked to be putting it away in the quarter as the Eagles kicked 4-6 to 2 goals straight. But they just ran out of gas. The lack of reward for effort really bit them hard, as suddenly North could get a bit more easier ball movement to their forward line. And a couple of players really appreciated this supply, which was, of course, Paul Curtis and Cam Zerha, who were both doing everything in their powers once the ball actually got there. And they ended up pushing them over the line. It was 9-8, 62 to 6-16, 52. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
very strangely enough, the Kangaroos still won on X score. A lot of
hey.
their shots were very easy. So they actually probably could have scored a bit more accurately than. Yeah, as I said, the Eagles' defense were a bit worse. Good performers, but definitely broke down in the back half.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's the fact that granted, inaccuracies for the Eagles definitely do not help. 16 behinds when they very much could
Mm,
have had full control. At least in terms
yeah,
of score, in terms of conversion, like that would have been really nice for them. But
yeah,
North looks solid around the ground, especially when they got the ball inside 50. Their ground level work was really good for them. It's an area that they've been focusing on over the past couple of months, which has been really good, especially with Paul Curtis up there. Like he makes a massive impact, and
mm,
he's become a really solid small forward player. Um, Luke Parker has
absolutely.
looked really good when he's floated up forward. Jack Darling has been really solid up there as well. They've got some. They're really looking like a solid mid to forward team. Defense could definitely use some
Mm,
work still, but they're getting better. Charlie Comben has made a huge impact down in that defensive line. Granted, he did have an
yeah,
injury in this week's game, but he has had such an impact in the past month or so, I would say.
yeah,
And they found their right pieces. They just gotta keep working at it.
yeah. Look, I will say, like, I know what you mean about the midfield to forward line, but unfortunately, I think that's where this game was a big example of it. It's again, it all just exists in the forward half for them,
Mm.
like, especially their midfield. They could not push up all that well and provide options for either at least pressure in terms of the ball going into the Eagles forward line or marking outlets for some of their players, like McKercher, who did fantastically on the half back line, but just again, honestly, if they had a half decent back half transition, he would have been like maybe like 10 score involvements from the back half. It felt like
Yeah.
that sort of game. It just wasn't getting any reward for effort. Caleb Daniel, he had a bit of a mixed bag, but he definitely improved, especially in that back half. But yeah, it was just finding those players to distribute the ball to, and it was pretty lean. Um, Especially since some of their inside midfielders, like some of them had okay games. I think it was Kara Sheasel
Hmm.
definitely did okay. Luke
Yeah.
Parker, as you mentioned, but unfortunately, George Wardlaw probably had his worst game for the season,
Yeah, he didn't
and
have a good game.
yeah, Luke Davies Uniac was just he just felt there. Like a lot of his transition was people feeding the ball to him rather than winning his own. Um, Whereas someone like Tom Powell, he did win his own bowl, but sort of burnt it. So a very mixed bag for them in the midfield. And it did, and a lot of it came late. Like the fact that the Eagles were winning the clearances a bit early on. Oh, not clearances. Were winning the territory early on, even though they were losing the clearances. Um, Sort of just spoke to, how not inept, but very insipid uh North's midfield can be at times.
Yeah, I agree. It's like we know they're heading in the right direction. Both of these teams are. Like
Oh yeah.
Essendon, the Eagles have improved massively over the past couple of weeks, but they're still both just not at the right stages where they should be as of yet.
Yeah. And I will say, final bit of credit for the Eagles, because I think have I said all my main points? Yeah. Because as I said, like I will say the Eagles were very smart because when North did get their game going, and this is the difference between what the Eagles were doing and what North was doing.
Hmm.
The Eagles are actually pushing up a few players, which was very brave because we know how exposed their backline.
Yes.
But players like Tom Cole, Harry Edwards, and even Liam Baker, who was sort of, I wouldn't quite call him a forward at half game. I don't think he played technically. I think he technically played inside midfield, but it was a bit more defensively.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, as I said, all of those players were very good at aggressively intercepting when North's ball use in transition was quite poor at times. And yeah, as I mentioned, unfortunately, 18 scoring shots from turnovers from the Eagles translated to 5-13. So even though they had this area of the game pretty well done, yeah, they just couldn't convert off it. And I will say also, yeah, they also prevented their toes from getting the game. Jack Darling, 0 goals. Nick Larkey, 0 goals. So you know what I mean. I think you got to put a little props to Sandy Brock and Harry Edwards,
Yeah.
who sort of were floating between roles. Yeah, I'm not sure actually who had the direct opponent on Darling. It was a bit. It was a very weird matchup.
I think they
Also, no,
rotated quite a
Harry Edwards
couple.
was on Larky.
Yeah, that's right.
Brock was on Darling. And then, as I said, Harry Edwards also,
I think they floated
yeah, it was
whenever they had to.
It was a very weird game.
Yeah, it was. It's definitely not wrong.
It was like, because North had so little territory, as I said, Harry Edwards, he just floated up because it's like, yeah, the ball's not coming down here. I might as well get involved. So, yeah, it was very smart from the Eagles. It should have paid off. They should have won. But, yeah, North just ended up winning. Bit of a disappointing result for the Eagles, but North fans will also be hating the way that this game played out.
Yeah, 100%. All right, jumping over to our individuals though, and one thing that North fans will be happy with is Paul Curtis. He was very influential up forward, kicking 3 goals from 8 disposals, 7 of them effective, equating to 87.5% efficiency, 3 contested possessions, 4 score involvements, 3 tackles, 10 pressure acts. Harry Sheasel was impressive in the midfield and off half back whenever he had to rotate. He finished with 28 touches, 22 of them effective, equating to 78.6% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 7 marks, 4 inside 50s, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, 7 tackles, and 17 pressure acts. And Colby McKercher, we had also mentioned before, was important with ball movement and transition, collecting 35 disposals, 31 of them effective, equating to 88.6% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 4 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 5 score involvements, 8 ground ball gets, and 6 13 metres gained. For the Eagles, Tyler Brockman was solid with pressure. He finished with 17 touches, 9 contested possessions, 5 score involvements, 6 tackles with 5 of them inside 50, and 22 pressure acts. And then Sandy Brock stood tall in defence, alongside Harry Edwards, of course. He collected 10 disposals, 9 of them effective, equating to 90% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, 10 pressure acts, 10 1%ers, and 9 spoils. As I mentioned before, Charlie Comben did suffer a back injury. I don't think it's super bad, but he did come off looking a little worse for wear, so hopefully he's all right. On the MRO front, Luke McDonald was fined $2,000 for tripping Liam Ryan, and Elijah Hewitt was fined $1,000 for, you guessed it, contact with an umpire.
Yeah. And also that was a minor point that I forgot to make about North's defense, is I was actually impressed how they managed to keep shape. They were getting threat under, and they lost Charlie Comben as well. So, yeah, as I said, it is an underrated victory for that performance, even though A, they won and should technically be celebrating. But B, yeah, as I said, they were just bombarded in an area that they usually struggle with. So,
yeah, I completely agree.
We've seen the Eagles get a lot from their forward entries. It was just such a shame that it didn't happen on the one day that they had a good chance of winning.
Yeah, like this would have been a really good opportunity for them to show a lot of what they've improved upon over the past month or so, but it just the inaccuracies just wasn't meant to be.
And again, stuck on one win. Another game where you could see them getting another one, and it just goes past them.
Yeah,
they have to find it from somewhere, probably in the half of the year, but hopefully they get another one for the year.
Yeah, they might find an easier opponent to get the jump on. I'm not too sure who. We'll have a look at that probably in the next couple of weeks anyway. But until then, let's jump over to our next game over at the MCG Sunday night, Carlton and Essendon blockbuster.
Yeah, and look, not many people gave this game much consideration to actually be a blockbuster, and early on, it seemed that Essendon might be down for the count. they conceded 6-4 to 1-1 in the first quarter, and it seemed like it was just going to be too much for the undermanned Dons. 2 goals to Charlie Curnow, a spread of forward and back half goals, and a centre domination led by Tom De Koning. But as the Bombers have proven, they will not give up without a fight, no matter who they're fielding. And Carlton, on the flip side, proved to their fan base that no lead against no opposition is safe against them, because they would only kick 5-8 for the rest of the games themselves. No more than 2 goals in the quarter, while the Dons would charge forward the rest of the game quite valiantly, with yet again Carlton's poor disposal, trying to be the villain of their own story. They really gave the Dons a lot of options to generate attack, because again, around the ground matchups, it was clearly Carlton had a lot of favour. And it wasn't just, in the forward line. It was someone like Blake Acres running fairly unopposed. I know he had Dersma with him, but that's not sort of the matchup you sort of want. Dersma's more of a run with a speedy player, where Blakers is that sort of big body. In terms of the forward line, as I mentioned, it was one of the players that sort of led me to look out the worst one-on-one defensively. But, poor Jaden Laverde had a very tough time with Charlie Curnow, and the fact that he only got onto him, I think will be a minor win for Essendon. But as I said, it was just like a lot of the individual performers on their top end won out. But Essendon were just able to get, even though a lot of their players didn't exactly, perform consistently over 4 quarters, they did still get a lot of impact out of them. Players like Isaac Kako didn't have a lot of possessions, but some of his handball chains were very, very lethal. The debutant, Luamon Luau, kicking that first goal, trying to get involved in the forward half, provide a lot of ground pressure. Zach Johnson as well. His first game, was the first game back? Was he the one that got injured in his first game? And then, I can't remember, but
might have been.
Either way, he had a very fantastic game as well. And, and even someone like Todd Goldstein, despite getting smashed by De Koning, still had a few moments of his own. So yeah, as I said, Nate Caddy as well, another one. Still very moments. Yeah, but as I said, it was very weird because, it was one of those things where, you felt like they were going to come back. You felt like Carlton were just giving enough, but at the end of the quarter, the play slowed down a bit, and it just didn't give Essendon enough time. You felt like if there was another, they might win it, but they ended just falling just short. The final margin being, of course, 11-12, 78 to 11-4, 70. Another game where the Dons were ruthlessly efficient up in their forward 50, making the most of their opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. The fact that they were able to make this work, again, despite the lack of personnel, despite the fact that Tom De Koning was having an absolute field day against Goldstein, and they were just able to capitalize on conversions from their midfield into their forward 50. They just couldn't stop it. They just couldn't stop Carlton going the other way at the end of the day.
Yeah. And a lot of what Essendon did was so smart. And I guess this is sort of the second point I have with this game, is the adjustments after quarter time. Because Martin and Merritt, I think Martin was sort of a bit in the halfback line, a bit up forward. He's technically playing in a halfback position, but it was really a wing position. Whereas Merritt was playing in a forward line. But, they just decided, with the matchup, Merritt was actually a bit more suited to halfback, try and support the defence. He went there. It didn't have the biggest impact. But again, the bravery of when you're not actually up, putting one of your best players in a position you wouldn't expect, because they relied on Durham and Parrish and Caldwell to do the bulk in the middle. So that I thought was absolutely good. Martin was then able to go forward, and he had a very solid impact in this game.
He did.
As well as just some of the other adjustments around the ground. They almost made the Blues look very silly, coughing up such a big lead. Well, as I said, Carlton just seemed like they didn't have much to answer for a battered Dons team.
Yeah, it's like they had to pretty much beg their top end players, like the players that they know can always kind of flip a game on its head at the flick of a switch, to force an impact, to make something happen a little bit more. I don't know how I'm trying to word what I want to say. It's like they tried to make them do the bulk of the work, essentially. And whereas for Essendon, that's not the same story. Because they have a bunch of really, really solid top end talent like Caldwell, Caddy, Merritt, etc., etc. But they don't have to ask them to, have that impact. They just do it by themselves. They cause.
Yeah.
They're the reason for Essendon still being able to contend despite all of their injuries.
Yeah, and it's a very difference in the type of turnovers too, because again, Essendon's turnovers is from them taking the game on. And I know again in the first quarter, we've seen it where maybe they're a bit slow to start. Maybe it's a bit more from the back line. With all the players, it's hard to get that for link up. But at least they're willing to take the game on. Whereas a lot of Collins turnover, we're just a lot of players making simple mistakes here and there. Because overall, Carlton, their bottom 10, their bottom 5 players may have had more possessions than Essendon, but they definitely didn't have as much impact.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's pretty much it. It's the fact that Carlton have to rely on their top end talent to do anything. You can't.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna talk about this when I go through the individuals. But you look at Essendon's side of things. Everyone had an impact, even if it might not have been, even though it didn't lead to the 4 points and the victory, they're the reasons that they made it close. Everyone was in. Everyone was ready to force something to happen. They didn't have to rely on
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that they didn't even have I should know they did have Ben Mackay. The fact that Carlton didn't even have Harry Mackay to have a stronger influence up forward, and they did rely a lot on Curnow being the number 1 tall.
You're right. It was a McCarless game.
Yeah.
Both ends.
But it's just
no Mackays.
Just I don't know. I'm trying to make a point here, and I can't remember what I was going with.
No. I get you. As I said, for Essendon, with such a, let's face it, on paper, it's almost getting to the point where you would actually pick the Eagles' defense over Essendon's defense, because without I was about to say Laverty again. Without Ridley,
yes,
they really don't have any good matchups 1-on-1. And then you add Mackay, who's a middling season, but you sort of need that big body.
He's that number 1 defender who at least takes the number 1, number 1 offender, number 1 forward player, out of the contest sometimes.
This was very hodgepodge. You had players like Jackson Pryor. Yeah, sure, he was lit, but he was still making an impact. Angus Clark too. Again, sure, as I said, McGovern kicked a goal, took a few marks in 50, but overall, from what you would expect, a reasonable forward going up against such a young player, I thought that was actually really solid. And as I said, individually, Essendon players probably made more mistakes. I think it was just a high turnover game.
Yeah,
but they were far more excusable than some of the stuff that Carlton was doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, we'll jump over to the individuals now, starting with Adam Chera for Carlton. He was very solid at ground level, finishing with 24 disposals, 15 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 5 marks, 6 inside 50, 7 clearances, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, 7 tackles, 19 pressure strikes, 11 ground ball gets, 433 metres gained. George Hewitt is immense with pressure, collecting 29 touches, 9 contested possessions, 5 marks, 8 inside 50s, 8 square involvements, 9 tackles, 28 pressure strikes, 440 metres gained. And then down in defence, Jack Silvani, who had returned from injury, was very, very important down there, finishing with 17 disposals, 12 of them effective, equating to 70.6% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 10 intercepts, 6 marks, 2 score involvements, 9 1%ers, and 8 spoils. Shout out to Carlton debutant Hudson O'Keefe, who ended up in the ruck at some points, finished with 8 hitouts with 3 to advantage, as well as 7 disposals, 6 contested possessions, 5 marks, with all of them being contested marks and 2 of them being inside 50. Behind, 3 score involvements, 4 tackles, 8 pressure strikes, 2 1%ers, and 2 spoils. Over for the Bombers, 2-meter Peter Wright, of course. He was very accurate. He also got 12 hitouts with 2 to advantage when he had to chip out in the ruck, as well as 3 goals from 10 touches, 8 effective, equating to 80% efficiency, 6 test possessions, 4 marks with 2 of them inside 50, 3 score involvements, 4 tackles, 4 1%ers, and 4 spoils. Then Darcy Parish, first game of the season, I believe, for Darcy Parish, upon return from injury, or might be second, I can't remember.
I think that might be. Yeah.
I can't remember seeing him at all, so I think it's his first. I think he was out with a long-term injury end of last season. But anyway, he has returned from injury to an immediate impact in the midfield. He collected 31 disposals, 13 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 10 clearances, 4 score involvements, 24 pressure acts, 11 ground ball gets, and 397 meters gained.
And I can confirm that was his first game.
Thought so. And then, as you had mentioned before, shout out to debutant Luamon Lawal. He finished with 11 disposals, 3 marks, a goal, 5 tackles, 17 pressure acts.
Yeah. And I think, that was the also weird thing about this game is that Wiedering, that was probably his worst game of the season. He looked
he
out
was
of it.
very average.
He might be carrying an injury or
possibly,
but he just didn't look right. So hopefully, I think Carlton have the bye next week.
I think so too.
hopefully.
Jumping over.
Hopefully, he gets patched up.
To the MRO real quick. And Sam Durham will miss 2 matches for forceful front-on contact, aka a really dangerous bump in this context, against Adam Chera. The plus side is Chera did play out the game. He wasn't concussed or anything like that. But yeah, it was a very, very dangerous bump. So 2 matches, I believe, is sufficient.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to say it I'm going to say this half in jest, purely in jest, because I don't encourage players doing it. But yeah, he's looked fairly proppy. He still looks injured to me. So honestly, 2 weeks on the sideline, we're probably doing good. It's just, you don't want to be doing that because of that action.
Yeah, agree.
But yeah, I think even though Essendon don't have anyone to replace him, he could probably use a couple of weeks rest. Yeah,
100%. All right, jumping over to the game that only finished as we're recording this about 2 hours ago. The traditional King's Birthday Monday clash between Melbourne and Collingwood.
Yeah, and look, we're not going to go too much into depth for this. We do apologise, but I spent most of this game asleep because my stomach was in very much pain. But I did wake up in time to catch the last bit of this game, and boy, wasn't it a thrilling finish.
It was.
As I said, it seemed to be a pretty even comment around the ground. I'll let Blazy do a little bit after I finish, just on a general vibe thing. But from what I seen together, it seemed like Collingwood got a bit more of the possession, but Melbourne got a bit more of the territory. And it ended up being just that tiny bit more class around goals, around that, more class around that forward 50 that led Collingwood to the win, because they got absolutely smashed in stoppages. This was 16 centre clearances to 7 and 39 clearances to 29, and 47 hitouts to 21, which, Cameron isn't a hit-out ruckman, but it's very rare for him to get smashed like that. But
he was also up against Max Gorn, of course.
Yeah, obviously up against Max Gorn, but Cameron might have actually got the last laugh, because as I was sort of predicting, I was not as I was predicting, as I was alluding to, it was a very close contest. The game came down to the last minute, as you would expect from a 1-point margin. Max Gorn got a back half intercept to try and launch the last play, He goes for the barrel, and it breaks your heart to see it. It's the side off the boot floater.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely went nowhere. Collingwood intercept mark. I felt like he should have. Did he have a final shot on goal? I wasn't actually paying attention to that bit. Felt like they should have.
No,
Yeah,
I don't think
won
so.
by two or something. I don't know. But anyway, that sealed the game. It was 10-11, 71 to 11-6, 72. Collingwood, again, very efficient, as they normally are. But Melbourne, sort of an area where we all know where they struggle. But it was a bit of a shame to see because they definitely did have the ability to win this game. But yeah, it was just a couple of moments here and there. There was a passage of play that I thought where Melbourne got the ball on the wing. Clayton Oliver, he had a fairly reasonable game, received a handball, goes for a very rush kick, obviously trying to fish out of behind to
Mm-hmm.
kicks it out on the full. The next forward play that they get, I think it was maybe Ed Langton on the win. He won it. He sees Clayton Oliver to his side, not to go to, probably due to lack of confidence, chooses the longer forward target in a marking contest, which results into an interception. Jeremy Howe had an absolutely fantastic game all day. It was not the player you wanted to be kicking near to. But again, he influenced that contest,
He
started
did.
a chain going the other way. I think Steel Sidebottom also had a very nice play around that period of time, and were just able to move the ball forward and keep it in their forward half.
Yeah. No, I watched about half of this game. I had some other stuff that I had to attend to before getting to, sit down and kind of just chill out, watch the footy. And yeah, it was a lot of very much back and forth games. Like the score line is pretty accurate to what kind of transpired throughout the game. It was very much a back and forth contest. Melbourne's inaccuracies up forward can a little bit be addressed due to it being a wet game as well as per most of the games this week. Um, but it's also one of those moments where you kind of they let it slip away. The fact that they had so many more scoring shots and a little bit more forward entries compared to Collingwood is shows that they have improved massively over the past month as to what they were at the start of the season. Um,
Yeah.
but on the flip side, Collingwood are the number one ranked team for the most part at the moment. They're sitting top spot for a reason. And the fact that they're able to still finish out these close contests and like really capitalize upon mistakes that teams like Melbourne have been known to do over the past month, which is severely inaccurate kicks, as we have seen specifically from the game played at Alice Springs. Um, it's it's something that I think other teams can also capitalize on is the fact that they're able to play Melbourne wide and force their conversions to be so inaccurate.
Yeah, and I was just loading up the score. It's like Melbourne, when they were straight in front, they had no problem. It was just those wider shots, and that's coming from not having that many experienced goal kickers. They kicked 5-4 from set shot, 5-5 from general play. But again, it was just, if it wasn't easy, it seemed like they weren't getting it.
Yeah.
Um, so, at least from what I saw and what the graphics tell me. But as I said, as for Collingwood, as I said, they just seem to make more of the moments. I did see, and this is also just coming from the match, that they did get a tiny bit of rub of the green from the umpires. Again, you don't want to blame it on them, but it adds to the small moments that maybe win close contests like this. But
Yeah, it's
yeah,
something
it just seems.
that a lot of people kind of forget to understand that free kicks can genuinely turn momentum. Like, and umpires
Yeah,
have the ability to do that in an instant. And granted, obviously, most of the time you want to hope that it's an unbiased free kick, like, that's actually in
yeah.
faith with the game. But there really is moments where one whistle and it could completely change momentum as to how a team is going to capitalize on the
And it's
movement or
not
whatever that they currently
oh,
had.
and it's not always like as straightforward as a free kick count because obviously it was 20-29. So again, not the strangest free kicks are, not the most lopsided,
No.
but as I said, sometimes it's just psychological, I think. Whereas, in a team like Collingwood where they can capitalize anything, like if they get moments like a mistaken umpiring free kick going against them, like they only need a bit of time and territory and they'll make you pay. That's why I always feel so lethal when they get it. And like, you know, who knows whether they get more iffy free kicks than other teams. I'm not into those conspiracies, but I feel like Melbourne's a team where if they get like a free kick going to them in like a middle of the area place, you know,
Mhm.
they've got an efficient 450. Like, you know, it may not actually make a direct difference. It may be a little bit less memorable. But it's sort of that, you know, and that's why it's always, I feel like good sides tend to, you remember a lot more. Because you're not always, most people cheer the underdog, especially a team like Collingwood, who no one likes to see win.
Yeah, true.
Uh, but also, you know, as I said, it's like teams that benefit from kicks are more likely to actually convert those into goals, which rubs salt in the wound.
Yeah, no, that's about right. It's and it is an interesting matchup. This was always going to be an interesting matchup because both teams, like a lot of teams that often hold the marquee game slots, tend to
Mm.
make it a really like a much more interesting contest because it's something about
Yeah,
that atmosphere of a marquee game. Like and we've seen it a lot already this season. Like even in the derbies,
yeah.
it's all been like that.
Yeah. Collingwood,
Obviously,
Essendon.
round one, Collingwood, Essendon, Richmond, Melbourne for
Mm.
Anzac Eve, Anzac Day, Dreamtime. You know, all of these big marquee games. Both teams, even if the scores aren't massively you know, even if there is like a bit of a score disparity like there was in Dreamtime, especially because of that fourth
Mm.
quarter, like both teams still give it much more than what they would, I feel like, any other kind of game.
Yeah, yeah. As I said, it just seems to be a bit more. Ah, I guess I wouldn't like saying magic around it, but definitely a lot. It's a lot easier to lift in contests because I think all players they go reasonably hard. But you know what I mean. I feel like it's easier to get momentum in these sort of games.
Yeah, it is.
Because you obviously everyone wants to win, but in some of these clashes, there's just always a bit more external forces driving you. Uh, that you know, as I said, it doesn't really. It's one of those things that it's more enjoyable for a football fan because as a coach, it's random. Like you literally can't control
Yeah,
it. But as a fan, you definitely see that in some of the performances, and this was a game where you could see that in droves.
absolutely. And speaking of performances, I'm going to touch on the individuals now, starting with Jeremy Howe, who was extremely influential in defense, as you had mentioned, finished with 26 disposals, 20 of them effective, equating to 76.9% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 14 intercepts, 5 marks, 5 tackles, 11 pressure acts, 7 1%ers, 7 spoils, and 582 meters gained. Nick Dacos, despite being tagged by Ed Langdon, still had an impact. He kicked 1-1 from 19 touches, 9 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 8 clearances, 4 score involvements, 4 tackles, 15 pressure acts, 431 meters gained. And then for Melbourne, Cosy Pickett was very important through the midfield and forward position. He kicked 3-1 from 15 disposals, 7 contested possessions, 4 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 6 score involvements, 21 pressure acts, 3 1%ers. And Clayton Oliver was a pressure machine, collecting 30 touches, 14 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 9 clearances, 6 score involvements, 7 tackles, 23 pressure acts, and 419 meters gained. As far as I'm aware, there aren't any injuries from that match. Um, and obviously, you know, we're recording this so
Yeah, I
early,
think.
there's no MRO report
Yeah,
or anything like that, no rising star. So we might
I don't
mention
think there
that.
was any obvious knocks, so hopefully it's all just random finds.
Yeah, no, I didn't see much in the half that I watched, so hopefully it should be okay. So we'll
Yeah,
jump over instead to the fixture for the round ahead.
yeah,
Starting
and
with
oh,
starting with a
yeah.
Thursday night clash, an interesting Thursday night clash, between the Saints and the Dogs. I say this is interesting because it's Jack Sinclair's 200th.
Mm,
So the Saints could make this a lot more eventful than some might predict.
yeah.
But I think the Dogs would want to bounce back again after their loss to Hawthorn.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where, again, the funny thing is, with such a low scoring round, we have our saviors in St Kilda to provide some breakneck offense for us.
Well, I
Again,
mean,
it was a very funny fact that this round happened when St Kilda and Fremantle had the bye.
yeah, I know it's
Normally
so
two of the more
weird.
inefficient teams.
It's such an
But
interesting thought, and the fact that just those two teams were not playing this week is wild. Um,
yeah.
well, I mean, the one interesting
Okay.
thing to note about this though is that the fact that like a lot of people who did like a mid-season All Australian related
Mm,
put in Wanganeen Miller and Cal Wilkie into that side.
mm.
Cal Wilkie, I 100% get. He's rated the number one key defender in the competition right now. He's been so
Yeah,
good.
I don't think it's a doubt. Like he's just the best performing backman.
But the fact that like we've still seen Wanganeen Miller be a little inconsistent with a lot of his ball usage, despite the numbers he is putting up, it's interesting to see like where halfback currently sits, not just for St Kilda as a whole, but even just going into like their
Yeah,
wings and their midfield.
I still think he's top five.
Oh yeah,
Halfback. I
he's
mean,
good. But
yeah.
I feel like
I don't know where exactly I'd put him.
there are definitely like he could be better utilized. Um, Maybe even more for his kicks rather than more for just his handball transitions.
Yeah, well, I mean, he is a very kick Fergus guy, but again, it's just whether like some of the stuff up the lines letting him down, or again, sometimes he feels like it's a bit forced into rush decisions where he doesn't have to. But
Yeah,
again, there are some halfbackers that are a bit like that anyway. But that is where the interest in this contest comes, because in terms of pure matchup, it's again a bit of an off week last week, but at least in terms of head to head, there's a big difference in the inside midfield from the Bulldogs.
mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, the back half movement, the outside game of St Kilda is much. Okay, it's a bit better. Like, I don't think St Kilda's outside game's like that great. It is on the half back line, but it does fall back a bit on the. So,
Yeah, it does.
um, yeah, it will be interesting. The Dogs will need to be a bit cleaner than they were last week, because I think that again would play into the Saints' hands if they were a bit too willing to be scrappy. Because we've seen St Kilda, they represent themselves in a scrap. They do get controlled in the air at times. They can get out muscled in clearances, but in just general ground balls, they tend to be. So the Bulldogs with a bit of polish should get done. However, this is sort of like, I feel like this is another trap game, which could derail the Bulldogs. This is very dangerous. I think they'll be sweating to get over the line, even though I think that they're like maybe edging towards 70% chance to win.
Yeah, it's definitely plausible. But I would expect a much stronger bounce back from the Dogs. I think the Dogs have a little bit more of a better matchup. I don't know if Sam
Yeah,
Darcy is expected to come back this week or if he might still be another week or two away.
it might
Um,
be, yeah.
but even then, no, he still have to contend with Wilkie on that one. So that might not be the greatest of lineups as he'd be hoping for a great return.
Yeah, I will say one thing for St Kilda. I mean, I've already said one thing. I don't think that far out of it, but they have in a lot of the games that they have been a lot better in. The other teams have done a lot of turnovers. So the wins against the sorry, not Giants. Uh, the wins against Geelong, the wins against Port Adelaide, the one against Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
So they really do like other teams being efficient. So again, that's why I do make that point where, and again, the last game they played, which was against Melbourne, but at the same time, yeah, just by like player by player matchup, the Bulldogs have the superior. There's no doubt about that, and
Yeah,
should
great.
win.
They should.
Just don't tip a big margin, even though it might be a blowout. I just think that the risk is there that St Kilda might actually pull one out here.
Yeah, I think the Saints could make it close. All right.
Yeah.
Jumping over to our Friday night game down in Tasmania in Launceston is Hawthorn hosting the Crows, and
Yeah,
the fact that this is in
honestly.
Tassie makes this a lot more interesting. I think.
Yeah, because it's like, I must admit, the only Adelaide game that I remember Tassie one where they just absolutely got the pounce on North Melbourne when they were like really arse and North Melbourne were really good. But, this is just a game where it's like, I don't know. It's just very hard to predict because obviously Adelaide, um, last year Hawthorn got the clean sweep against Adelaide, I should mention. Um, but, as I said, Adelaide definitely offensively seemed pretty good, but then you got Hawthorn's backline, which defend top. So,
Yeah, that's
again,
right.
some of their opportunistic players. Again, this is a game where Rochelle Keys and Rankin will be the most important players for Adelaide offensively.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then you look at the back half and you're like, well, Adelaide are pretty good, but they might be a bit too tall for the Hawks defense. And again, then you just got the winds of will be cold. It's at night. There may be a bit of a breeze. So yeah, I just think anything can sort of happen. Again, too, midfields that can be all right, but sometimes fail a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just it's honestly probably one of the hardest matchups to predict this round.
Yeah, I would say so. Like, I think just based on conditions, I'd like to go Hawthorn, but I think the Crows just have a much better matchup currently. And granted, we said last week, in regards to the Hawthorn midfield, that they haven't really been looking good. They stepped it up this week against the Bulldogs, of course. But are
Yeah,
they going to be able to continue that against the Crows, who have shown that they are able to shut down teams like really, really well in midfield transition?
yeah. Well, as I said, it's I wouldn't say shut down in midfield transition, but they will punish you a lot from turnovers from that transition.
I think the
Like
loss of
that can
Heatling
derail us a
might be a
lot.
big factor though, because he has been really solid with his
Yeah,
pressure.
yeah. Well, that's the thing, and like Isaac Cummins sort of has been that, and like sometimes they've rotated in terms of that impact, but yeah, obviously if you do choose to put Isaac Cummins in the inside midfield, it does take away from your wing
Mm.
play, which will be very important, especially in a Tassie game where you might want a bit of a marking wing just to aid some more difficult moments of ball transition. So, yeah, as I said, I think you're probably just edging on Hawthorn just for the effect, but yeah, it's not much.
Yeah, it's definitely a coin flip of a game currently. All right,
Yeah.
let's start with our Saturday games now. Going up to the Gabba, it's the Lions hosting the Giants.
Honestly, two teams in the top half of the ladder, but don't really feel all that threatening at the moment. Um, Maybe a bit harsh on the lines, but I do think for the last few weeks, they've definitely been inefficient, and that would well.
Mm.
Two very probably not as much bite as some of their uh, setup would suggest. Uh, that being said, GWS, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the Lions approach this because again, like we know their backline is going to be really good. They're going to get, but if the Lions go wide and find them out, this might just be something that Kingsley is going to have to work out. Because as I said, we've seen two teams do it and nullify that.
Mm-hmm.
Fagan's a very smart individual. He won't have not noticed. Um, but it's whether that every team should do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if they do fetch it up and they just and then, oh, oops, it doesn't work. You can't always invest into what your opponent.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, but at the same time, I said I think to uh combat the Giants very iffy forward line link up. Again, we know how good a forward line that they have on paper,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just not getting the job done. They'll be able to defend that. And again, inside midfield, surely the Lions get it done. GWS has been pretty bad at uh, it's got to be said. So that should set up the Lions game. Um, if they just bomb it inside 50 from those clean, then bring Sam Taylor in, that's where I can see the Giants winning this. But I think the Lions will just get too much territory.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the Lions are just better. I wouldn't say better suited for the Gabba because obviously they have lost the Gabba this
Yeah,
year. But I think they're currently just better placed in terms of structure, that they're able to contend a little bit better
yeah,
with the Giants. Obviously, the Lions defense. is fairly solid. Obviously, we also know the Giants' defense is fairly solid. So I think a lot of this will actually come down to the midfield. And I think that the Lions will just completely outpace them.
Yeah, and that's the thing is the Lions also have good outside targets.
Yeah, that too.
You know, to go to. As I said, it was more just their approach. Like their transition wasn't bad. They just weren't getting that much out of it against Adelaide. So
yeah, no, that's something they'll tighten up on this week anyway.
Yeah, and they'll have to drill down on that because you got to focus on that one. So hopefully that'll be enough to patch it up. But even if it is a scrappy game, that should be fun for the Lions because again, at the Gabba, they're sort of used to it. Like this is one where GWS bringing it to a scrap won't worry the Lions too much if it comes to that. It's more just back half movement. If GWS really fire, that's where they get in this game. I'm still favouring the Lions by about, again, like the St Kilda game, by about 70%.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. All right, jumping over now to the MCG, where the Bombers host the Cats. And despite what we've seen from the Bombers, the fact that they have been able to contend, I don't think that's going to be the case this week.
No, and this is where their defense is really going to fight them because we've seen Geelong, even if they don't have flat out performances, they will have one quarter. And you know what? We're going to put in another scoring based, whatever I do every week. And that is that Geelong will have how far do I want to go? I'll say at least 8. I won't be surprised if it's 10, but I'm going to say an 8-goal quarter.
Do you want to know what the forecast is going to be, even though it's still pretty far away?
Don't care. Well, Brian Myers will get it done. He'll kick 8 off his...
Top of 14 degrees, low of 9. Currently 7% chance of rain.
7% chance of rain? That's perfect.
Yeah, it should be like a sunny, cold day at the MCG.
Oh, it's played in the day. I thought that was a nighttime prediction.
No, it's a twilight game, so it's going to be a little cool. It's a 4:15 game.
All right. Okay. So yeah, as I said, still in the sun. So yeah. So honestly, I would like to see that. Even if I do think Essendon will be out in a quarter, I hope they do well for the. Again, like they did in Carlton, but again. We saw Carlton with some of their offensive problems that they've been having this year still get that jump start on them. And any jump start that the Cats would be able to get, you would think would be quite ruthless.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. Like, you would like to think the Cats make this a percentage game, like, and being able to capitalize on Essendon's weaknesses. For Essendon,
it's about not making it a full quarter.
Yeah.
It's about limiting it to at least 1.
Yeah, I think for the Bombers, they want to at least try to contend each quarter, try and at least string 4 quarters together, even if they don't come home with a victory or be anywhere near close to it. They just want to be able to...
4 quarters would be an absolute win. I think 3 quarters would be tough. For what they've been able to actually put in, I think they've got it in them to keep up with their Cats for 3 quarters. Because we've seen the Cats muck around with teams like West Coast, the big example. The game they lost against St Kilda, even though they came back with a wet sail, that was more early on that they were mucking around. So as I said, but at the end of the day, this is just a defense that Geelong dreams of playing against.
Yeah, no, completely agree. All right, jumping out to the west now, where it's North Melbourne's second sold game out to WA, and this time it's being held at Optus, taking on Fremantle. With Freo coming off of the bye, they should be really fresh and raring to go against this. I think North will actually contend with them maybe a little bit more than what people may expect, just because North don't have that momentum.
Yeah. Well, Freo, people I mean, can you call it momentum?
I mean, they won a game, and
they won. Yeah.
The fact that they haven't...
they're North played really badly. Freo should get. They haven't won 3 or 4.
No, I think Freo should still win this convincingly, but we have also seen how Freo play after a bye, and it's always been kind of dreadful.
Yeah, I think it's just that they really they don't like their game plan being interrupted. So again, that's going to be one of the main thing is, again, making sure that like the midfield battle, obviously North should be able to contend a bit better. They just need to do enough on the outside. Because we have seen Freo the last games when they have been going good. They've actually utilised the wings a lot less than they did the start of the year. Or Jeremy Sharp is dying of famine on the wings. So if North actually do put a bit of pressure, and Fremantle aren't a very high pressure team. So if they're just able to do enough, I reckon they can keep with. Do I think they'll win? Nah. It's, we're going to 80 to 90 territory for.
Yeah, I think so.
By vibes, though, you feel like it might be. Like, you wouldn't be surprised.
If North can string 4 quarters together,
not.
If they can string 4 quarters together, I think they'll at least prove something. Again, because they're still on that kind of development sort of stage rather than really contending. But for Freo, like you need to make a statement. Coming off of a bye, you need to make a statement that you want to really contend for finals. You're currently sitting 8th.
Yeah.
After you're meant to be really fresh and ready to go after a bye. Don't fall into
other teams around them
the
don't
trend.
Look that flash.
Yeah, exactly right.
Bulldogs, GWS, arguably Hawthorn, but I would say that they're still tracking okay. Yeah.
Like you want to stamp your mark here and now that you want to play finals, that you're ready to contend for the flag again, and this has to start here essentially.
Yeah, and it's also another good test for North Melbourne's tall defense because again, up against a forward line that's good but struggles at times, especially by the tolls. And they've got 3 solid tolls that they'll have to contend with of course, being Patrick Voss,
Tracy and Amos.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, as I said, it's going to be one of those things where even if like Fremantle, like maybe Shai Bolton, maybe Mark get involved, to win.
Yeah.
If they can limit that core of the tolls to maybe about 3, maybe 4 goals, I think that will be another positive boost to North Melbourne's. I won't say emerging, but definitely recovering.
Yeah, I think so. All right, shall we jump over to our Sunday games? I think we shall. Let's go over to the Adelaide Oval, where Port Adelaide will host the Demons.
Yes, and honestly, some very close contests in the last few games. Obviously, last year they traded blows. That was a 2-point contest by Port, with a 7-point contest by Melbourne. Funnily enough, both the away teams getting the win in that one, and then Port winning by 4 in 2023. So in recent history, these have been close matches. Haven't always been the cleanest matches, however. And this might be another one like that. Again, both teams sort of wanting to prove that they've got a bit more substance than their ladder position indicates. Especially for Port Adelaide, because I think this run a game before the last stretch, they need to win at least 3 of the next 5 if they're any chance, and that would even still be now.
Yeah.
So they need to get this game. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, as I said, again, it really depends how clean out they are, because their defense should with North's forward line. That should just be a given. Unless they turn it over repeatedly at halfback. We've seen Melbourne again against like a few plays off turnovers, but the midfield battle, like that's where this game's at.
100%.
Melbourne probably a bit more cleaner. Port a bit more stronger in ball winning ability. We may see Jason Horne-Francis back. We may even see Viney back. He's on track to recovery. So yeah, I think there will be a lot dictated from this game. Gone against Vicentini. That might be the edge where Melbourne, start to get their first win from those sort of contests. So, yeah. And on the flip side, Port will need to make sure they make the opportunities because they're still pretty solid. Even against Collingwood, we saw that. Well, I saw bits of quarters of it. You probably saw a bit more, but yeah, so not going to be that high scoring. It'll be a moments game, but whoever will win, it will be like they're slightly ahead of a very 50-50 contest. I'm going to tip Port. I'm going to edge towards Port. I don't know whether that's actually true or not.
I don't know who to go with on this one. I'm very much a coin flip kind of situation. I want to say home field advantage, but that's never really been the case for Port Adelaide, especially in this season. I thought Melbourne again, they looked really decent against the Pies earlier today, so I want to kind of give them the edge. They do, however, come off of a 6-day break for this, whereas Port get the 7. It could make a big difference. I'm not entirely sure in this situation. But yeah, I'm kind of a coin flip on this one. So if you want to go with Port Adelaide, go for Port Adelaide.
They play Saturday night. I guess it's a 7.5.
Oh yeah, sorry. For some reason I thought they played Sunday. No, yeah, you're right. They did play Saturday night. In any case, let's jump over back to the West for our last game of the round with the Eagles hosting Carlton. And pretty much the same thing that we did with North and Freo is that I just want to see the Eagles play 4 quarters. Whereas for Carlton's sake, if they want to play finals, they need to make a statement once again.
Yeah. And I think this is the game that's the first double matchup being played, because obviously Carlton had that. It got them into, what do you call it? It got their season going to start with. I can't remember which.
Oh yeah, it's the second matchup for these teams, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because they played in gather round.
Carlton scored 17, 19, 121 to 614, 50. And that's the baseline. The Eagles have got to be a bit better than that. We saw that they were a bit more disorganized in games of the season, the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
They have got a bit better structure now. So really, I think they can keep Carlton to under 100. But, as I said, it's one of those things where I don't think they win, but I think they definitely could keep it reasonable. But yeah, it's going to be hard coming. So.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to see 4 quarters being played by the Eagles. Obviously, everyone expects Carlton to win this. I want to hope Carlton wins this, because that's who I'm gonna tip.
In the last few contests. Yeah.
But I want to see the West Coast play 4 quarters. I want to see them play convincing 4 quarters. I'd like to see a good performance out of Harley Reid, out of Liam Baker, Fridge, of course, who's normally been playing fairly well. I want to see the West Coast defense, even though they're still missing McGovern, to be really solid. I'm very impressed with Edwards, and both Brock and Brockman for that fact. I just think, they just need a little bit more development time. And I think against Carlton's forward line, it's going to be really, really good for them, especially if Harry Mackay is back in. Whereas for the West Coast,
I think you mean Cole, not Brockman. Brockman's up forward.
No, I was kind of meaning a bit of everyone, really. I know Brockman does play more forward, but like.
No, I get you. Yeah, you were talking about more general. More experienced players. Yeah, I get you.
And I think for the West Coast forward line, coming up against Wiedering, against Silvani, it's going to be a tough contest. You just want to hope that they can generate something.
But we can see a bit from the ground level, because again, that was sort of where Essendon were thriving a bit more on the ground. Obviously, Wright but
yeah, that's true.
Again, well, maybe if he is injured, he might flatten a bit. So maybe that's something for Oscar Allen.
Possible.
You would expect him to bounce back. Maybe it was just an off week. So, but yeah, they want to free from the ground players. So whatever goals they can get from the field. Maybe even Brockman himself. Still got a bit of forward craft, even though he has been a lot better as a fielder this year. So, we'll see.
It's possible.
No, and as he said, Harley, of course.
Yes. And then just for note, Collingwood, Gold Coast, Sydney, and Richmond all have the buys this week. And with that concludes episode 62 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast. Thank you all so much for coming to hang out, come to chat, come to chill, come to watch, come to listen, come to like, and subscribe. We're looking forward to this week as we normally do. Hopefully, there's going to be a little bit more interesting matches compared to the week just gone. We are back to 7 matches, so a little bit of a shorter week. We'll have one more round of this the week after as well. But hopefully, we get some fun out of this. I should be streaming and doing some other stuff throughout the week, so please go check out my socials, of course. Check out podcast socials for any updates and things of that nature, which you can normally find over there. Specifically the Instagram, because that's where we're most active, because I can't be bothered with the Facebook. I got locked out of the Twitter, and that's really about it.
Yeah.
Social media is hard.
Yeah.
But we do what we do. I am out and about with some stuff during the week, so I'll be posting about that on my socials if you want to go check that out as well as when I stream and things like that. Are you up to much this upcoming week?
Again, hoping that this stomach pain isn't like appendicitis or something.
Hopefully you're fine.
Hopefully recover. Yeah. So so as I said, I feel like I've been like hunched, but you can't really see that on my camera. But I've been more and more as this podcast has gone on. But hopefully I'll be okay. But I thought it was a good session, and and it was good to distract me from the pain. So I appreciate it.
Excellent. So until then, we will love you all and leave you all, and we'll see you all next week for episode 63. Take care.